That night at the Lakefront Philanthropy Gala in Chicago, I was passing the glass wall when I heard someone whisper, "How did the manufacturing defect get in?" I turned. It wasn't a stranger, but the very family who had torpedoed my college future 11 years ago. By the next morning, they had served me with a lawsuit demanding $5 million for parental support. My name is Marin Eldridge. Tonight, I was failing spectacularly at hiding. The balcony of the Peregrine Hotel was supposed to be a refuge. The air blowing off Lake Michigan was sharp for October, smelling of cold water and diesel, a welcome sting against the overheated, champagne-soaked atmosphere of the grand ballroom inside. I leaned against the cold glass railing, the minimalist black silk of my dress feeling paper-thin in the wind. Inside, the Aurora Foundation's Lakefront Philanthropy Gala was in full, deafening swing. 300 of Chicago's most powerful, most inherited, and most celebrated were packed shoulder to shoulder, shimmering under chandeliers that looked like frozen explosions. I hate these events. I despise the noise, the performative generosity, the endless networking loops where eyes scan over your shoulder for someone more important. I am the CEO of Vector Loom Analytics. I am supposed to be good at this. I am good at data, at patterns, at building predictive models from pure chaos, at turning whispers of market sentiment into billions of dollars of actionable insight. I am not good at small talk about summering in Nantucket or the virtues of this year's Bordeaux. A door latch clicked softly. I didn't need to turn. Rowan Calder moved to stand beside me, not touching, just offering presence. He radiated a stillness that I often had to borrow. "Running spreadsheets in your head again. Eldridge?" His voice was low, laced with an amusement that few people ever got to hear. Rowan was a partner at Northbridge Capital, the kind of quiet, dynastic money that didn't need to shimmer or shout. He was also, in the rare moments we weren't analyzing emerging markets or debating the ethics of algorithmic bias, my anchor. We had kept our relationship intensely quiet for over a year. In our world, personal attachments are leverage, a vulnerability to be exploited. "Just appreciating the structural integrity," I lied, gesturing vaguely at the skyline's steel and glass. "It's loud tonight." "It's a success," he said, which meant the foundation had likely exceeded its fundraising target by at least 20%. He saw the tension in my shoulders and sighed, handing me his pocket square. I hadn't even realized my palms were damp. "Ready to go back in? The mayor is holding court by the ice sculpture, and I think he's melting faster than it is." I managed a small smile, blotting my hands. "Give me 5 more minutes, then we can face the lions." He nodded, his gaze lingering on me, a silent question of support, before he slipped back inside. I took one last deep breath of the cold, clean air, straightened the spine I had built for myself, and followed him. The transition was always a physical shock, a wall of heat, heavy perfume, and the high-pitched ringing of hundreds of champagne flutes colliding. The jazz trio was playing something frantic. I was making my way along the perimeter of the room, heading toward the relative safety of the bar for a club soda, when the whisper sliced through the din. It was precise, it was modulated, engineered to carry just far enough, coated in a veneer of old money lockjaw. "How did the manufacturing defect get in?" The voice was as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. It was the sound of my childhood, the sound of judgment, the sound of impossible standards and casual cruelty. It was my mother, Joanna Whitaker. Another voice, younger and sharper, chimed in with a tinkling, brittle laugh. "Mother, please, security must be slipping. I thought they vetted the help properly at these things." "Isolde, my sister, Izzy." The blood drained from my face, my feet stopped moving. It felt instantly cold, colder than the balcony, a paralyzing, internal frost. 11 years, 4 months, and 6 days since I had last heard those voices directed at me. Rowan, who had been half a step ahead, sensed the sudden void beside him and paused, turning. The warmth in his expression evaporated when he saw my face. He followed my gaze. I turned slowly, mechanically. This was not an accident. They were standing near the silent auction display, a fortress of Chanel suits and surgically enhanced smiles. Joanna, my mother, looked perfectly preserved in amber, her ash-blonde hair immaculate, her gown a cascade of pale gold sequins that screamed its price tag. Isolde, my younger sister, was her perfect, polished miniature, already mastering the art of the disdainful head tilt. She was clinging, as if for structural support, to the arm of a man who looked exactly like his family crest, Graham Everett IV, a legal shark from a family that owned half of Lake Forest. They were looking right at me. Not at me, but through me. Their expressions hovering between mild irritation and clinical curiosity, as if I were a catering assistant who had wandered off station. The room seemed to shrink. The jazz trio in the corner faded to a distant hum. This was the moment, the scene I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times during caffeine-fueled 3 a.m. coding sessions in my studio apartment. The moment where I would unleash 11 years of curated rage, a perfectly articulated monologue of my success, their failure. But the rage didn't come, only a profound, arctic calm. A switch flipped. This was not a family reunion. This was a hostile negotiation. Joanna's smile was tight, expectant. She wanted this. She wanted a scene. She wanted the validation of seeing me unravel, of proving to her friends and, more importantly, to her new money-in-law, that the defect was still defective. I held her gaze. I let the silence stretch. A tactical delay. I saw Izzy's smirk falter, confused by my lack of the expected hysterical reaction. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice was perfectly level, meticulously polite, betraying nothing. It was the voice I used for hostile takeovers. "Have we met?" The impact was immediate. It was a social slap, clean and sharp, and Joanna recoiled as if I had physically struck her. Izzy's mouth dropped open, a very undebutante-like expression that she quickly tried to conceal. Graham Everett, the lawyer, straightened his tie, his eyes narrowing, sensing a disturbance in the careful hierarchy of the room. Before Joanna could reload, before she could pivot from shock to indignation, a deeper voice cut in, sharp as a scalpel. "What is this?" "Dr. Lionel Whitaker, my father." He emerged from the cluster of admirers, his presence sucking the air from the space around him. He was a celebrated cardiac surgeon, a man who moved through the world with the undisputed authority of someone who literally held lives in his hands. He wore his tuxedo like armor, his eyes, the same cold gray as mine, swept over me with zero recognition and maximum contempt. He didn't just look at me, he assessed me, diagnosed me as an anomaly, and dismissed me. He did not speak to me. He would not grant me that dignity. He snapped his fingers, a shockingly crude gesture, at a passing security guard in a headset. "We have a guest who seems to be lost," my father announced, his voice resonating with surgical precision. "Perhaps you could check her credentials. The Aurora Foundation is very particular about its guest list. We need this." Interruption. Handled. This was it. The public execution. He was going to have me thrown out. The cluster of people around them, old money rivals, new tech hopefuls, all turned to watch. They smelled blood. I could see the internal calculations clicking behind their eyes. Who is she? Is she important? Is she trash? The security guard, a large man who looked deeply uncomfortable, began to move toward me, his hand touching his earpiece. I felt, rather than saw, Rowan move. He didn't step in front of me. He didn't raise his voice. He simply occupied the space next to me, a silent, unmovable declaration of alignment. I felt the faintest touch, the warmth of his hand at the small of my back, a gesture of support so subtle it was invisible to anyone else. He inclined his head, his gaze directed not at my furious father, but straight at Graham Everett, the lawyer. It was a calculated power play, acknowledging the only person in their group who mattered in his world. "Graham," Rowan said, his tone perfectly casual but edged with beryllium. "Good to see you. I don't believe you've been formally introduced to Marin Eldridge." He let the name hang in the air for a beat. Graham's expression shifted from smug to confused. The name meant nothing to him. Then, Rowan delivered the killing blow, his voice clear and cutting in the sudden, localized silence. "This is the CEO of Vector Loom Analytics." He paused, letting the information land. "A strategic partner of my fund." If my question was a slap, Rowan's introduction was a tactical detonation. The name, Vector Loom, changed the oxygen in the room. I watched, with a clinical detachment, as Graham Everett IV went pale. It was not a subtle shift. The blood physically left his face. His eyes widened, not with simple shock, but with dawning, catastrophic, professional horror. I could almost see the file opening in his brain. Vector Loom Analytics, the unicorn data firm that had come out of nowhere, the one every venture capital fund on the continent was trying to get into, the one whose predictive modeling was 5 years ahead of the market. I knew, from market intel, that Graham's prestigious firm, Everett and Hale, had been trying to get a meeting with my internal legal team for 6 months. They wanted our business. They wanted the prestige, the staggering retainer, the IPO payday, and the man who signed those checks, the man whose business Graham was so desperate to acquire, had just watched his future father-in-law try to have me thrown out like a trespasser. Lionel's face, usually a mask of supreme, godlike confidence, flickered with uncertainty. He didn't know the company, but he understood the shift in power. He knew Northbridge Capital. He knew Rowan Calder's name. He knew he had just made a terrible, unquantifiable error. Izzy just looked confused. Analytics sounded boring. But Joanna. My mother processed the threat instantly. She saw the new narrative forming, the one where they were the villains, and she moved to poison the well before the story could set. She laughed. It was a brittle, tinkling, agonizing sound, worse than a scream. She stepped forward, closing the distance, placing a proprietary hand on my bare arm, as if we were all sharing a wonderful, hilarious joke. I did not flinch. I did not pull away. "Marin, darling, you didn't tell us." Her voice dripped with a thick, treacly, manufactured maternal pride. She turned to the rapt audience, her eyes wide and suddenly, professionally glistening with crocodile tears. "She's just our little miracle. We are so proud. She's built this whole thing, all by herself." She squeezed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, a sharp, punitive pain. "The truth is," she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for everyone in a 10-foot radius to hear. "The poor girl only finished high school. She wasn't suited for academics at all." She cast a sympathetic, pained look at Lionel. "It was a terribly difficult time. We actually had to put her out. Tough love. You know." She looked back at the crowd, her smile beatific. "Sometimes you just have to let them hit rock bottom before they can truly fly." The narrative was set. The manufacturing defect was now the prodigal daughter, a high school dropout who got lucky, a troubled girl abandoned by her loving, long-suffering family for her own good. It was brilliant. It was vile. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the acid tang of 11 years of silence. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to talk about the frozen nights in a friend's Honda Civic. I wanted to talk about the 20-hour days coding in a diner booth, fueled by stale coffee and desperation. I wanted to talk about the check for $140,000 from my grandparents' trust fund that they stole to pay for Izzy's debutante season in Aspen. But I didn't. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flash, not a phone camera, a professional press lens. A photographer from the Tribune's society page, sensing the drama, was panning across our frozen tableau, capturing the scene. They wanted a scene. They wanted tears. They wanted the emotional woman, the unstable CEO, the hysterical daughter. So I gave them nothing. I did not engage. I did not defend myself. I did not argue. I simply looked past my mother's weeping performance, past my father's stony, calculating fury, past Izzy's triumphant smirk. I found that camera lens, and I stared directly into it. I held its gaze. My expression was not angry. It was not sad. It was blank. It was the calm, neutral, assessing face of a CEO analyzing a critical threat. I let the photographer capture the entire scene: the weeping, clinging mother, the powerful, disappointed father, the smug, beautiful sister, and the silent, cold daughter in black. I let them print the lie, because I knew something they didn't. Lies are just bad data, incomplete sets, and I am very, very good at finding the rest of the data. In the ballroom, the jazz trio shifted. The frantic tempo dissolved into the slow, mournful blues of a saxophone solo. The spell was broken. I extricated my arm from Joanna's grasp, gently but firmly. "Rowan," I said, my voice cutting through the sudden, heavy silence. "I think we're done here." I turned my back on them. I did not run. I did not look back. I walked steadily, shoulders straight. Rowan, a silent, solid presence at my side. I could feel every eye in the room on my back, a physical weight of judgment and curiosity. I didn't care. We didn't speak as we crossed the vast marble lobby. We didn't speak in the velvet-lined elevator, or as the valet, sensing the mood, silently pulled Rowan's sleek, understated sedan around. Only when we were merging onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring into streaks of silver and gold, did Rowan speak. "Well," he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. That was efficient. I just stared out the window, watching the black, restless water of the lake disappear into the night. The gala was over. The war had just begun. Rowan's car was an island of pressurized silence. He drove with an economized, focused grace, his hands steady on the wheel as the city lights streaked past us. The dashboard glowed a soft, clinical white. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say that wouldn't be an understatement. He was smart enough to know that what I needed wasn't comfort, or platitudes, or even outrage. What I needed was to process. He pulled into the private garage of my high-rise, the engine's quiet thrum cutting off, plunging us into a sudden, heavy quiet. He didn't move to get out. "Will you be okay tonight?" he asked. His voice was level, the voice of a man assessing risk. Yes. My own voice sounded hollow, distant. "My offer to have Northbridge's PR team engage is still on the table. They can have a counter-narrative out by morning. CEO of humble origins targeted by estranged family. It's a good angle." I shook my head, my hair rustling against the leather headrest. "No, not yet. This isn't a PR war. Rowan, it's an audit." He looked at me for a long moment, the dim garage light carving shadows under his cheekbones. He saw the logic, the cold calculation in my eyes, and he respected it. "All right, but you're not alone in this. Marin, call me, any hour." "I know, thank you, for in there." "I've always got your back," he said simply. My apartment was 50 floors above the lake, a world of glass and steel and muted, neutral tones. It was my fortress, the place I had built to be the antithesis of the overwrought, suffocating beige and gold of my childhood home. The first thing I did was kick off the agonizingly beautiful, impossibly high heels. The second was to pour a glass of water, my hand shaking almost imperceptibly. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was a living database. A million points of light, the complex, interconnected grid of Chicago sprawling below. I placed my palm flat against the glass, just as I had on the balcony of the Peregrine hours earlier. The glass was cold, a deep, structural chill that seeped into my skin. It felt exactly like the pen. The memory didn't drift in. It slammed into me, a physical impact, throwing me back 11 years to a different room, a different piece of paper. Rivermere, Illinois, a town obsessed with appearances, with old brick, with perfect manicured lawns, and the suffocating quiet of generational wealth. I was 18. I was in my father's study, a room paneled in dark, funereal cherry wood that always smelled of his cologne and old leather-bound medical journals. It was a week after my high school graduation. My acceptance letters, University of Chicago, Northwestern, even a far-flung, ambitious application to Stanford, were piled on my dresser upstairs, untouched, uncelebrated. Dr. Lionel Whitaker sat behind his enormous baronial desk. He wasn't my father in that room. He was the chief of cardiac surgery, a man who tolerated no errors, no deviations from his plan. My mother, Joanna, sat in a wingback chair to his right, her hands folded, her expression one of placid, supportive agreement. She was his surgical nurse, in life as well as in the hospital. In the center of the desk, on the pristine leather blotter, was a single, expensive-looking beige envelope. "Marin," Lionel began, his voice devoid of any warmth. He steepled his fingers, a gesture I recognized from countless difficult diagnoses. "We need to discuss your future and the reality of your prospects." He gestured to the envelope. "Your grandparents," he said, referring to my mother's parents, "left a considerable sum for your education, a trust. You know this." I did. It had been my beacon, my escape route, $140,000. My grandmother, Evelyn's best friend, had been a quiet, sharp woman who saw the daughter she had raised and, in turn, saw me. She had made the trust ironclad, or so she had thought. "A college education is a significant investment," Marin, Lionel continued, "and like any investment, one must consider the return. We've discussed this. You and I both know you are, let's be frank, not suited for that kind of rigorous, high-level academic environment. Your focus is poor. You're distractible." He was referring to the hours I spent in my room, not studying the pre-med textbooks he left on my pillow, but tearing apart old radios, writing lines of code, building rudimentary algorithms on a second-hand laptop. He saw it as a defiant, useless hobby, a waste of a good mind that should have been focused on biology. "It's nothing to be ashamed of," Joanna murmured, her voice like soft, suffocating velvet. "Some people are simply more hands-on. Perhaps a nice trade school, eventually." "The point," Lionel cut in, impatient with the pretense, "is that letting $140,000 sit in a low-yield trust, waiting for an academic career that will never materialize, is financial malpractice." He slid a sheaf of documents from the envelope. They were thick, creamy, official. He also produced a pen, a heavy, black and gold Mont Blanc, his signature pen, the one he used to sign surgical charts, the one he used to sign Izzy's glowing report cards. "I have found a better vehicle," he said, "a diversified portfolio. It will serve as a much more practical investment in your future, a family investment. We will manage it for you. Of course, all it requires is your signature to release the funds from the trust's educational mandate and transfer them to the new account." He turned the documents and pushed them, along with the pen, across the vast expanse of polished wood. "This is a power of attorney, limited to the trust," he explained, tapping a line with a perfectly manicured fingernail. "It gives us the latitude to make the best decisions on your behalf, for the good of the family." I looked at their faces, my father, the brilliant, infallible surgeon, radiating absolute certainty, my mother, smiling, encouraging, her eyes bright with what I desperately, stupidly, wanted to believe was love. I was 18, I was smart enough to code, but not smart enough to see the scalpel at my own throat. I wanted to believe, for one last, agonizing moment, that they were finally on my side, that this was, perhaps, a strange, adult, complex form of a peace offering. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't see the clauses that gave them total, discretionary control. I just picked up the pen. It was ice cold, a solid, heavy weight in my hand. It felt like a tool, not a writing instrument. It felt like a knife. I signed my name, Marin Eldridge. The ink was black and final. The scratch of the nib on the thick paper was the only sound in the room. My father smiled, a thin, bloodless, satisfied smile. "Good," he said, gathering the papers immediately. "You've made a very mature decision. You're dismissed." 3 days later, I found the invoice. It had been left carelessly on the kitchen counter, mixed in with the mail. It wasn't a bill. It was a statement from a high-end social concierge in Aspen, Colorado. It detailed, in elegant, swirling font, the charges for the upcoming Aspen Winter Cotillion for Isolde, a non-refundable deposit at the Gilded Stag Aspen, a hotel that charged by the minute for breathing its air, a bespoke couture gown, listed simply as the Izzy, limousine service, ballroom rentals, orchestra fees. The line items went on and on and on. The total at the bottom, already paid in full from a new account I didn't recognize, was $138,500. The blood drained from my body. The kitchen, moments before warm and smelling of Joanna's morning coffee, turned instantly, glacially cold. I knew, with the kind of immediate, intuitive certainty that would later make my career, exactly where the rest of the $140,000 had gone. Legal fees for the transfer, bank fees. This was their diversified portfolio. This was their family investment. It was Izzy's debutante season. I confronted them that night. It was not a confrontation. It was an execution. I held the paper. "This," I said, my voice shaking. "This is my college fund." Lionel didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked annoyed. He looked, above all, bored. He was reading a journal, and he slowly, deliberately, lowered it to his lap. "That," he said, "is an investment in your sister's future, a future that, unlike yours, has a significant and reliable projected return. She is making contacts. She is securing her position. That," he gestured to the invoice, "will pay dividends for the rest of her life. It is an investment in our family's social standing." "And mine?" I whispered, the paper trembling in my hand. "What about my future? What about the trust?" He stood up, and he delivered the line, the final diagnosis, the words that would become the cornerstone of my entire life. "A degree is a waste of money, Marin," he said, his voice flat, final. "You'll never use one." The next day, I came home from my shift at the local library, the one place I could access the internet for free to look at college portals, and my key didn't work. It slid into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. I rang the bell. I knocked. I saw Joanna part the sheer curtains in the living room, look directly at me, and then drop the curtain, her face a mask of placid indifference. They had changed the locks. I stood on the perfect snow-dusted brick porch of my own home in the fading light of a late March afternoon. A freak snowstorm was blowing in, the wind sharp and wet, stinging my cheeks. I had nothing, just the clothes I was wearing and the backpack on my shoulders. I sat on the porch steps until the sun went down, getting colder and colder, believing, hoping, that this was some final, monstrous test, that the door would open, that my father would appear and say, "Now, do you understand?" The door never opened. At 10 p.m., I finally left. I went back to the house once, 2 days later, to beg for my things, my clothes, my laptop. My mother met me at the door, flanked by a security guard I didn't recognize. She handed me 2 black suitcases, not my things, a curated selection of my old, out-of-season clothes. My old, slow laptop was not included. My books were not included. I stood in the snow with 2 suitcases, erased. I slept on my friend Anna's couch for 3 weeks, until her parents gently, apologetically, asked me to leave. I found a job at an all-night coffee shop on the edge of town. The graveyard shift, mopping floors and wiping down counters from midnight to 8 a.m. The pay was minimum wage. The smell of burnt coffee and industrial bleach clung to my hair, my clothes, my skin. I saved every dollar. I bought a used, battered laptop from a pawn shop for $250. During the day, I slept on a cot in a rented room I shared with 2 other girls. At night, after my shift, from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., I sat in the back booth of that coffee shop, the world dark and silent outside, and I taught myself to code. I taught myself Python. I taught myself machine learning. I read every white paper, every academic journal, every forum post on data architecture I could find. I was fueled by a rage so cold and so deep it was almost silent, a pure, white-hot, logical fury. 6 months after they changed the locks, I got my first email. A small logistics company in Des Moines had seen a data sorting algorithm I'd posted on a forum. They wanted a custom module. They would pay $500. It took me 48 hours of straight, agonizing work. When the payment notification hit my sparse, fee-ridden bank account, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in that diner booth, the sun rising over the highway, and I felt the first spark. The tiny, sharp, clicking sound of a key turning in a lock, the tinder spark, the seed of vector loom. Now, standing in my apartment, 50 floors above the city that had tried to eat me alive, I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, the scar on my palm, a small white line from a broken coffee pot during one of those 3 a.m. shifts, seemed to itch. My mother's words at the gala echoed in my head. Tough love. We had to put her out. They had built their narrative. They had used the press, the public, the social shame as their weapons of choice. They thought this was a battle of feelings, of he said, she said, of family drama. They thought they could shame me into submission, into silence. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I do. I am Marin Eldridge. I do not deal in feelings. I deal in facts. I find patterns in the chaos. I build empires on the truth. I turned away from the window. The city lights reflected in my eyes like a million tiny burning data points. If they wanted to use the public as a weapon, I would use their own records as a sword. I would not fight them with tears or stories. I would fight them with their own receipts. The sun had just cleared the horizon when I walked onto the data floor at Vector Loom. My headquarters occupied the top 5 floors of a new, hyper-modern tower in the West Loop. The main floor was a vast, open-plan cathedral of quiet, focused energy. Analysts and coders were already at their stations, the glow of their multi-screen setups reflecting in the polished concrete floors. The only sound was the hushed click of keys and the whisper of the ventilation. This was my sanctuary. This was the world I had built from nothing. My office was a glass-walled cube suspended above the floor, giving me a 360-degree view of my company. I was on my 3rd cup of black coffee before 7 a.m., reviewing EU data compliance reports, when my executive assistant, Maya, buzzed. Ms. Eldridge, there's a priority courier here for you. He won't release the package to anyone else. I felt the cold snap in my veins before I even saw the envelope. Send him up. He was not a standard messenger. He wore a crisp, dark suit and carried a slim leather briefcase. He had me sign a digital tablet with a stylus. The document he handed me was thick, creamy, and carried the embossed letterhead of Everett and Hale LLP. I didn't open it. I knew what it was. I placed it on my desk, a perfect, white rectangle against the black recycled basalt surface. I waited until the courier had vanished back into the elevator. I slid it open with a steel letter opener. The language was dense, archaic, deliberately obtuse, but the keywords leaped out like flames. Dr. Lionel and Mrs. Joanna Whitaker, plaintiff, filial responsibility, neglect and abandonment, emotional distress, support commensurate with defendant's means. And then, the number, not in digits, written out in full, devastating clarity. $5 million. My first call was not to Rowan, it was to my lawyer. Avery Stone materialized on the 80-inch monitor that dominated my office wall. She was in her downtown office, already wired, a cup of tea steaming beside a stack of files. Avery was sharp in a way that made scalpels look dull. She wore a severe, impeccably tailored gray blazer, and her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. It was not. It was efficient. I held the document up to the camera. It's here. I'm downloading the electronic filing now, she said, her eyes already scanning her own screen. She was silent for almost a full minute, her processing speed nearly as fast as one of my own servers. Filial responsibility, she finally said, her voice dripping with clinical disdain. It's an antiquated, desperate law, a relic from the poorhouse era. Most states don't enforce it. Illinois is unfortunately one of the few that can. It's almost never used, and almost never successfully, but that's not the point. It's a PR missile, I said, my voice flat. Exactly, Avery agreed. It's not designed to win in court. It's designed to bleed you in the press. It's a shakedown. They're not suing for damages. They're extorting you for your reputation. The $5 million figure isn't a legal calculation. It's a headline. As if on cue, an alert flashed on my secondary monitor. A financial news ticker, Vector Loom's CEO, sued by impoverished parents. I clicked it. The article was slick, perfectly planted. It wasn't on some gossip blog. It was on a respected financial wire. It was filled with quotes from sources close to the family. Graham Everett IV had had a busy night. Dr. Whitaker and his wife are pillars of their community, a family friend was quoted as saying. They gave her everything, to be abandoned like this, in their twilight years, while she lives in a glass tower. It's a tragedy. She's worth billions, another concerned observer noted. And she won't even take their calls. What kind of person does that? It was the narrative Joanna had crafted at the gala, now set in print. The ungrateful, disloyal, high school dropout daughter who got lucky and forgot the loving parents who, through tough love, had made her a success. Avery, I said, I have an emergency board meeting in 10. I need your preliminary strategy, now. Simple, she said, leaning into her camera. They punched first, which is a mistake. They've defined their terms of engagement. They think this is about filial piety. We are going to redefine the terms. This is not about piety. It's about theft. We don't defend. We counterattack. I'll have a full brief ready this afternoon. The video call ended. The call for my board meeting began. The faces of my board, Lila Evans, our chairwoman, Kenji Tanaka, my COO, and Seth Jordan, our head of communications, flickered to life. Seth looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was already loose. Marin, this is a 5-alarm fire, Seth burst out, before Lila could even call the meeting to order. My team is monitoring feeds from Frankfurt to Singapore. This story is moving. It's attached to our stock ticker. We're down 3.5% in pre-market trading. It's a nuisance suit, Seth, I said. It doesn't matter, he shot back, his voice rising. The market doesn't read the fine print. They read the headline, CEO sued by parents. It's toxic. It screams instability. It makes you look ruthless. And not in the good, negotiating a deal way, in the sociopath way. It jeopardizes the brand, our recruiting, our corporate culture, everything. Lila, a former federal judge with a spine of pure titanium, muted Seth with a single, raised hand. Seth is agitated, she said, her voice a calm baritone. But his point is valid. Marin, this is a perception problem. What is the financial exposure? $5 million, I said. Seth actually groaned, putting his head in his hands. Pay it, Marin. For the love of God, pay it. It's a rounding error. It's the cost of a single server bank. Pay it. Bury it in an NDA so deep they can never speak your name again. And let me get back to running damage control. We can spin it as a generous, private family settlement. We can have this fire contained by noon. The other board members looked at me, their expressions carefully neutral. But the logic was appealing. It was clean. It was fast. It was just money. I stood up from my desk. I walked to the glass wall of my office, looking down at the hundreds of people working, their careers, their mortgages, all tied to the company I had built, to the name I had made. No, I said. The silence in the virtual meeting was absolute. Marin, Seth said slowly, as if speaking to a child. This isn't the time for principle. This is triage. You are mistaken, I replied, turning back to the camera. This is only about principle. What you are suggesting is not a settlement. It is a ransom, and you do not pay ransoms. You do not negotiate with terrorists, and you do not reward extortionists. I leaned on my desk. This is not a family squabble, and it is not a PR crisis. It is a hostile data breach. They have injected a false narrative into the market. They are attacking the fundamental integrity of my character, which is inextricably linked with the integrity of this company. If I pay them, I continued, I am validating their data. I am admitting guilt. I am confirming that I am the person they're painting me to paint. I am telling the world, and every employee in this building, that when faced with a lie, our strategy is to pay for silence. That is not the culture of Vector Loom. The only response to bad data is better data. The only response to a lie is the immediate, surgical, and overwhelming application of the truth. I looked directly at Lila. They have filed a claim. I am filing a counterclaim. This will not be handled by the PR department. It will be handled by the legal department. We will not be settling. We will be winning, and we will be doing it publicly. Lila held my gaze for a long time. She saw the iron. She nodded. Once. Very well. Ms. Eldridge, it's your name on the door, and on the lawsuit. See it done. Seth, your job is no longer containment. It's support. You will follow legal's lead. This meeting is adjourned. The screens went blank. My next call was to Rowan. His voice was calm, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath it. I saw the wire. Graham is a fool. He's a probate lawyer who thinks he's a litigator. He just handed you the moral high ground on a silver platter. He thinks I'm still the 18-year-old girl they threw out in the snow. I said, he thinks I'm scared of him. He thinks I'll pay to protect my reputation. You're not that girl, Rowan said. You're the woman who built an empire that could buy and sell his entire family. I'm staying out of it, as promised. Northbridge will make no public comment, but his voice shifted slightly. I happen to have a few old friends, journalists, who have a particular interest in the predatory use of archaic laws. I might just send them a tip to look into the history of filial responsibility in Illinois. Purely academic, of course. Thank you, Rowan, I said. I have to go. I'm setting up the war room. Give 'em hell, Marin. By noon, we had commandeered a secure conference room on the executive floor. It was all glass and steel, with a panoramic view of the city, but it was windowless to the rest of the company. It was now a war room. Avery Stone arrived, not with a briefcase, but with a rolling hard case of files. She was flanked by two associates who looked like they'd been raised in a law library. Right, Avery said, plugging her laptop into the main hub. The room's largest wall, a smart glass display, lit up. Let's build the case. Avery was a symphony of cold, strategic motion. They want to talk about support. Let's talk about the support they received. I've drafted the countersuit: breach of fiduciary duty, civil embezzlement, constructive fraud, conversion. We are demanding the return of the full $140,000, plus statutory interest for 11 years, plus all legal fees, plus $5 million in punitive damages. We're matching their number and giving it a legal basis. They'll claim the statute of limitations has run out, I said, already pulling up my own research. They would, Avery said with a thin smile. Except the discovery rule applies. You didn't discover the full extent of the fraud. The fact that it wasn't just a poor investment, but a deliberate conversion for Izzy's cotillion. Until you saw that invoice, and you were under duress and undue influence as a minor. Effectively, we'll argue the clock didn't start until you were financially and legally independent enough to fight back, which is now. But to make it stick, I need the paper trail. I need it all. I'm on it, I said. I've retained Kite and Loomis forensics. Macy Loomis is en route. Avery's eyebrows went up. You're not playing. Loomis is the best. Good. My team will subpoena the banks. We want the trust's originating documents from your grandparents' estate, and we want every bank statement from Lionel, Joanna, and the trust itself, from 3 months before you signed that paper to today." One of her associates began tapping furiously. I walked to the central whiteboard, the only analog thing in the room. I picked up a black marker. I drew a single line down the middle. On the left, I wrote, "Whitaker narrative." Underneath, I wrote, "Abandoned, ungrateful daughter, suffering, pious parents." On the right, I wrote, "Vector loom data." "This is our playbook," I said, turning to Avery and her team. "They attack me personally. In the press, we don't respond. We file a new piece of evidence. They have Joanna cry on television. We subpoena the receipts from the Gilded Stag in Aspen. They send Graham to threaten my board. We depose their banker." I put the cap back on the marker. "They want to fight this with emotion. They want drama. We will give them nothing but a cold, clean, undeniable audit. We will bury them in their own paperwork." Avery Stone allowed herself a small, sharp smile. "This," she said, "is going to be fun." Macy Loomis did not look like a corporate investigator. She looked, in fact, like a very disappointed high school librarian. She was a compact woman in her late 50s, with sharp gray hair in a bun so tight it seemed to pull her eyebrows up, and thin, wire-rimmed glasses. She arrived at the war room carrying a locked aluminum briefcase, which she chained to the leg of the steel conference table before opening. Avery Stone and I were the only other 2 people in the room. The air was cold, the ventilation humming. "The banks have complied," Avery said, passing Macy a tablet. "The data dump from the primary trust and the initial transfers from the Whitaker accounts are in your secure folder." Macy nodded, plugging her own encrypted drive into our system. She did not waste time on pleasantries. She was not a lawyer, paid to talk. She was a forensic accountant, paid to find. The 80-inch smart screen at the end of the room, which normally displayed Vector Loom's global data flow, now became Macy's canvas. "All right," Macy said, her voice crisp and dry as old paper. "Let's conduct the autopsy." A flowchart began to form. It was brutal in its simplicity. "Block 1, she said, tapping a key. A box appeared. "The Eldridge Educational Trust. Established by your maternal grandparents. Funded with $140,000 upon your grandmother's death, the trust's mandate, and we have the original charter, is explicitly for your tertiary education and related expenses." She tapped again, a thick blue line connected to a new box. "Block 2. The Whitaker Family Holdings Trust. A new legal entity, registered in Delaware, opened 48 hours before you signed the power of attorney." "They were building the shell company before they even had the money," Avery clarified, mostly for the record. "They were," Macy confirmed. "Now, here, a red line, sharp as a cut, connected Block 2 to Block 3. The transfer, your signature, activating the POA, the full $140,000 is moved from the Educational Trust to the Family Trust. Date, March 6th, 11 years ago." "And then," I said, my voice quiet, "the investment." Macy gave a short, humorless laugh. "Block 4. The disbursement. 72 hours later, not a stock purchase, not a bond, a complete liquidation of the account, the entire sum, withdrawn." "Where did it go?" Avery asked, leaning forward, though she already knew the answer. "They were clever, but not clever enough," Macy said. "They were acting like criminals, so they tried a rudimentary washing technique. They bounced it between 3 different shell accounts, all opened that same week, but they were sloppy, amateurs. They used the same bank for all 3. It took my team about 15 minutes to unravel." Macy split the screen. On the left, the final, messy trail of the $140,000. On the right, a file of invoices, receipts, and bank statements Avery's team had subpoenaed from a dozen vendors. "They wanted to hide the source of the money," Macy explained, "but they were arrogant about the destination." She began to draw lines, matching dates. March 9th, a wire transfer of $50,000. Payee, The Gilded Stag, Aspen, Memo. Deposit, Winter Cotillion Ballroom and Presidential Suite Package, for Isolde Whitaker. A new line appeared. March 10th, $45,000. Payee, Atelier Dubois, Paris, Memo. Bespoke couture gown and fittings. Rush order. Client, Izzy. March 10th, she continued, her voice a relentless monotone. $10,000. Payee, Aspen Logistics and Limousine. Memo. Full week service. Private fleet. She didn't stop. Florists, jewelers, private caterers, the bill for the orchestra. The total came to $138,500. The invoice I saw? I murmured. It's a perfect match. To the dollar, Macy confirmed. They stole your entire education to pay for your sister's debutante party. We have the physical transfer order, Avery said. She slid a document, laminated in a sterile plastic sleeve, across the table. From the Ed Trust to the Family Holdings Trust, it required your signature via the POA, and 2 trustees to execute. I looked at the paper. There they were. My father's signature, Lionel Whitaker, a bold, arrogant slash of black ink. My mother's, Joanna Whitaker, a looping, practiced, elegant script. My team analyzed the original document, Macy said, pointing. The ink is period correct. The signatures are certified genuine. But here's the procedural detail I love. The forensic stylometrist confirmed the pen, the pressure, the nib width, the ink saturation. All 3 signatures, yours, your father's, your mother's, were made with the exact same high-end, heavy-nibbed fountain pen, likely a Mont Blanc. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the phantom weight of that cold pen in my hand. He had handed it to me. I had signed. And then he and my mother had used that same pen to sign away the funds. It wasn't just a transaction. It was a ceremony. It gets worse, Macy said, pulling up a new set of ledgers. The Family Holdings Trust didn't dissolve. It stayed active, and it began receiving monthly management fees from your father's private surgical practice account. Fees for what? I asked. Macy highlighted 2 recurring payees. First, Everett and Hale, LLP, a $5,000 monthly retainer, beginning March 30th, 1 week after you were officially locked out of the house. Avery let out a low whistle. A legal firewall. They were prepaying for a defense. Graham Everett's firm has been on their payroll since the beginning. They were preparing, even then, to bury you in motions if you ever came back for the money. They were buying silence, I said. And the second payee? The Rivermere Society page, Macy said, highlighting a recurring payment of $3,000. For 6 consecutive months, the memo on every check just says, Community Focus. The articles flashed in my memory, the fawning, breathless local coverage of Izzy's party, Rivermere's winter rose shines in Aspen, the Whitaker family, a pillar of society, a dazzling debut for a future leader. It wasn't a party, I said, the coldness spreading from my stomach. It was a product launch. They stole my college fund and then used their own money to run a 6-month PR campaign to justify it. They bought her reputation with my future. They needed the narrative to stick, Avery said. And speaking of the narrative, she picked up her tablet. My office received an anonymous, encrypted email late last night. It was routed through a series of dead-end servers, but the source claims to be Joanna Whitaker's former personal assistant. She's terrified. But she sent us this. Avery put a screenshot on the main monitor. It was an email from Joanna's personal account to Lionel's, dated March 4th, the day before the signing. Subject: The M situation. Lionel, darling. I spoke with the advisors at Everett and Hale again. They confirm it's the only way. She is simply not college material. She's stubborn, and that awful, grubby coding she does is just a phase. Using the funds for Izzy is the only logical choice. At least it will build status for the family name. Izzy understands what's required of her. Em never will. We just need to get her signature on Friday. She'll be fine. She's resilient. Jay. She's resilient. The word echoed in the sterile room. It was the word they always used. Their adjective for me. It was their excuse for everything. It meant I could be damaged, and it would not count. This is intent, Avery said, her voice hard. This is conspiracy. This proves, unequivocally, that your signature was obtained under false pretenses. This isn't just a civil case anymore. Marin, this is textbook fraud. I stood up, walking to the glass wall. The city was laid out below me, glittering, busy, oblivious. It proves the old case, but it doesn't prove the new one. Why now? Avery? Why this desperate public lawsuit for $5 million? They've been quiet for 11 years. For that, Macy Loomis said, a grim satisfaction in her voice, we have to look at Dr. Whitaker's current financial health, which, it turns out, is catastrophic. She pulled up a new file. This one was marked highly confidential. Your father is being sued by 3 former patients, a quiet but extremely serious medical malpractice suit, allegations of experimental procedures, failure to disclose risk, and significant patient harm. I nodded. I'd heard whispers, but Lionel Whitaker is untouchable. His reputation is all he has left, Macy cut in. Because his insurance is gone. He was underinsured, arrogant, believed his own press. His primary malpractice policy is about to lapse, and with this pending litigation, no one will renew it. He is personally and completely exposed. If he loses this case, and my sources say he will lose, they will take everything, the house, the savings, the retirement. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My voice was steady. So he needs $5 million, but he can't just have it. It would be seized by the plaintiffs. Exactly, Avery said, seeing the strategy. But a court-ordered support payment from a child under a filial responsibility claim? That could, potentially, be structured as a protected, non-seizable asset. It's not a defense fund. It's a life raft. He's not just trying to get rich. Marin, he's trying to use you as a financial shield. He's trying to make me pay for his mistakes, I said. Again. So, Avery said, turning back to the table, all business. We have the original theft. We have the cover-up. We have the motive for the current suit. We have everything. She looked at her team. I want preservation of evidence letters sent, immediately, to every vendor, the Gilded Stag, the Rivermere Society page, Atelier Dubois. I want them on notice. If they destroy a single receipt from 11 years ago, I will have them in court for spoliation. Her associates began typing furiously. I turned back to my own terminal. And I'll secure our data. I began the protocol. I took every file Macy had found, every scan Avery had procured, every email, every invoice, every bank statement. I ran them through Vectorloom's most secure validation system. Digitizing all evidence, I narrated, for the log. Creating SHA-256 hashes for every individual file to establish a verifiable, untamperable digital fingerprint, timestamping every hash on a private blockchain. This is our chain of custody. From this moment, this evidence is immutable. I was taking their dusty analog sins and locking them in a modern digital prison. As the files processed, a flag popped up, an anomaly. What's this? I said. What is it? Macy asked. It's from the data dump from Joanna's personal cloud backup, which we subpoenaed along with the bank records, I said. It's an image of an old, corrupted USB drive. Most of it is junk, party photos, shopping lists, but my system found a fragmented file, a PDF. I ran the recovery protocol. The file flickered, stitched itself back together, and opened. It was a simple, one-page document. It looked old. It was a scanned letter. The file name was Scholarship Gramma Docs. My blood went cold. It was a letter, from my grandmother, to my mother. It wasn't a legal document. It was a personal one, meant to accompany the trust. Joanna. This is my legacy for Marin. I've watched her. She's not like you, and she's not like Lionel. She's a builder. This money is to set her free. I have put it in a trust. But my wish, my binding hope, is that you see it used for what it is. Her education. I am stipulating, personally, that this entire sum is to be used for college tuition only. She deserves to fly. Do not clip her wings. Avery read it over my shoulder. Her face was pale. They didn't just break a trust, Avery said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. They violated a dying wish. They knew. They explicitly knew. I stared at the words, for college tuition only. I stared at the words, do not clip her wings. I touched the screen, my fingers tracing my grandmother's faint, scanned signature. Print it, I said, my voice thick. Laminate it. This is Exhibit A. This is the one I want them to see. I saved the file. I hashed it. I timestamped it. I locked it down. The autopsy was complete. We had the body, the weapon, the motive, and the confession. The storm broke on a Tuesday. Seth, my head of communications, didn't even knock. He burst into the war room, his face the color of ash, holding a tablet like it was radioactive. She's on television, right now, Channel 7, the midday local broadcast. Avery, Macy, and I looked up from a complex map of the Whitakers' offshore microaccounts. Avery sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Put it on the main screen. Seth, full volume. The image that filled the 80-inch wall was a masterpiece of emotional pornography. It was Joanna Whitaker, but it wasn't the impeccably preserved, gold-sequined ice queen from the gala. This was a new character. This was Joanna, the suffering mother. She was sitting on a soft, pastel-colored set, designed to look like a suburban living room. Her hair was softer, slightly mussed. The Chanel suit was gone, replaced by a cheap, pilled, beige cardigan. It was a costume, and it was brilliant. She looked vulnerable. She looked poor. She was dabbing at her eyes, not with a silk handkerchief, but with a crumpled tissue. "We just don't know what to do," she was saying to the sympathetic host, her voice trembling, laced with a perfect, curated blend of confusion and heartbreak. We just want our daughter back. We love her so much." "It's just devastating," she continued, her gaze finding the camera, a direct, pleading look. "We tried so hard. We gave her everything, and then she just vanished. 11 years, not a word, not a card." The host leaned in, her expression one of profound, synthetic empathy. "And now, your husband, Dr. Whitaker, a beloved surgeon." "He's not well," Joanna whispered, a tear finally escaping, tracking a perfect, camera-ready path down her cheek. "He's worked so hard, for so long, for this city, and now we're facing challenges. We had to sell our winter home. We're just asking for her to help, a little, like any child would." "And she refused?" the host asked, her voice sharp with manufactured outrage. "Her lawyers sent us papers," Joanna choked out, dissolving into a small, weak sob. We don't understand. We're not suing for money. We're just parents. We're just asking her to come home." "Disgusting," Macy Loomis muttered, turning back to her ledgers. "She's good," Avery admitted, her arms crossed. "The cheap cardigan is a nice touch. It tested well, I'm sure. She's not the rich, vindictive mother. She's the poor, abandoned victim. And Marin, you're the cold, heartless billionaire in the glass tower. It's a perfect, simple narrative." "The stock is down another 2% since she started crying," Seth said, his voice flat. "The hashtag #MoneyOverMom is trending. The comments on our corporate Instagram, they're bad, really bad. The vitriol is personal." I said nothing. I just watched my mother perform. I watched her use the exact same brand of manufactured vulnerability she had used to trick me into signing away my future, now repackaged for a television audience. "It's fine," I said. "Marin, it is not fine," Seth snapped. "It's fine. Seth," I repeated, my voice cold. She's just released her opening salvo. It's all emotion. It's vapor. It's bad data. Our turn. What's our move? He asked. A press release? A counter-interview? No, I said. We don't respond to her. We release our own data. Avery, file the countersuit. Now, not in Rivermere. File it in Chicago. I want the full complaint, with all exhibits, on the public docket by 4 p.m. Avery smiled. Exhibit A, the letter. For college tuition only. Exhibit B, the Aspen invoices. Exhibit C, the fraudulent transfer documents. It's ready. Good, I said. And Seth? While she's playing the victim, we're going to act like a corporation. At 3 p.m. today, I want you to issue a press release. Announce the launch of the Vector Loom Fathom Fellowship. Seth looked confused. The what? It's an internal program I've been developing, I said. We're launching it early. It's a full-ride scholarship and mentorship program for gifted students from disadvantaged backgrounds, specifically those who lack family support. We will pay their tuition, their housing, and guarantee them a paid internship. We are committing $5 million to its initial endowment. Seth stared at me, his mouth open. 5 million? The same number. The same number, I confirmed. She wants $5 million to support her lies. I'm spending $5 million to support the truth. Your press release will not mention my family. It will not mention the lawsuit. It will be a purely positive, forward-looking announcement about our corporate values. Let the press connect the dots. That, Seth said, a slow smile spreading across his face. That is good. That is very good. But Graham Everett was already moving. He wasn't on daytime TV. He was on the financial networks. He was in his element, dressed in a somber $1,000 suit, speaking not as a son-in-law, but as a concerned officer of the court. It's a profoundly tragic case of elder abandonment, he said, his tone grave. We're seeing this more and more, this cult of the individual, this hustle culture that forgets the very people who made it possible. He held up a copy of a tech magazine. My face was on the cover. Here she is, celebrated as a genius, a visionary. But what vision? I ask. Is there in abandoning the sacred filial duty you owe to the parents who raised you? The law is clear. The moral imperative is clearer. He was slick. He was weaponizing my success, just as they always had. He was turning my hard work into evidence of my coldness. The atmosphere at Vector Loom changed. My employees were professionals. They were the best in the world, but they were also human. The open plan data floor, usually humming with quiet collaboration, was now marked by silence, by people whispering behind their monitors, then stopping when I walked by. I could feel the doubt. I could feel the question. Did she? Is she the person they're saying she is? They kept working. Their loyalty was to the company, to the mission, to the data, but they were unsettled. I was no longer just their brilliant, demanding CEO. I was a tabloid headline. That night, Rowan and I were at his apartment, a quiet, minimalist space that felt 1,000 miles from the war room. He was cooking, badly, moving around the kitchen with a restless energy. "She's a piece of work, your mother," he said, not turning from the stove. "She's a performer," I replied, nursing a glass of water. "And Graham is a parasite," he added, chopping an onion with unnecessary violence. "He's running a smear campaign based on a law from the 1600s. It's disgusting." "It's effective," I said. He stopped, putting the knife down. He turned to me. "So, let's be effective. I made those calls." I looked up. "What calls?" "The journalists, the ones who like digging, not just reprinting press releases," he said. "I didn't give them anything. I just pointed. I suggested that if one were an investigative reporter, one might find a very interesting story by cross-referencing Illinois filial responsibility statutes with the recent, and very quiet, case filings in the Cook County Courthouse. Specifically, a new malpractice suit against a certain celebrity surgeon. I felt a small, sharp spark of something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. "Rowan, that's..." And he continued, I may have also suggested that the bank records for a long-dormant educational trust might make for fascinating reading. I just gave them the breadcrumbs. Marin, they're hungry. They'll find the loaf. The first crumb dropped 2 days later. It wasn't a major paper. It was an anonymous post on a medical insider forum. A nurse, claiming to have worked at Lakeview Medical Center for 15 years. Dr. L. Whitaker. People are finally looking. It's about time. Ask him about the surgical incident from 3 years ago, the one that was covered up by legal, the one where he used an experimental valve. The patient coded, and the family was paid a massive, quiet settlement. He's not a god, he's a liability, and his hands aren't as steady as they used to be. It was a whisper, but it was amplified. Within hours, a local investigative blogger had picked it up. Suddenly, the narrative of the beloved ailing surgeon had a crack in it. The second crumb was more refined, a well-regarded tech blog, one that focused on the people behind the code, ran a story. They hadn't been able to get to me, so they had done something brilliant. They had found Mr. Harrison, my high school math teacher. The article was titled, "We spoke to Marin Eldridge's high school teacher. He's not surprised." The picture showed him, older now, gray, standing in his old classroom, holding up a faded, printed-out sheaf of papers. "Marin," he said in the article. She was a ghost, quietest kid in the class, but her mind was a diamond. I taught calculus. She was already beyond me. She was teaching herself predictive modeling. In her junior year, she handed me this. He pointed to the papers. It was a cold start recommendation algorithm for our school library to predict what books a student might like based on their checkout history, even with no prior data. It was breathtaking. It was the core of what companies spend billions on now. She did it for free, on a junky old laptop. I asked her about college. The article continued. She just looked at me and said, "It's not in the cards, sir. I heard her family was difficult. To see her on the cover of magazines now. I'm not surprised she's a success. I'm just surprised she survived them." The narrative was splitting. The public, which had been a single, howling mob, now had 2 stories to choose from. Was I the cold-hearted heiress who abandoned her family? Or was I the quiet, brilliant kid who had survived them? Then the countersuit, with all our exhibits, hit the public docket. Avery's team accidentally leaked the PDF of my grandmother's letter to a legal affairs reporter, for college tuition only. The story changed. It was no longer about a daughter abandoning her parents. It was about parents robbing their daughter. Graham Everett panicked. He saw the ground shifting, and he made his final, fatal mistake. He went personal. He issued a statement to a notorious gossip columnist, the kind that trafficked in ruin. This countersuit is a fantasy, a pathetic, desperate attempt to smear a good family. The statement read, "It's what she does. She's unstable. She's always been unstable. Ask her about her personal relationships. Ask her about her partner, Rowan Calder. Ask her why a powerful man like him is hiding their relationship. Ask her what she had to do to secure Northbridge Capital's funding." It was a direct attack on me, and on Rowan. Avery was in my office in 5 minutes. "He's finished." "He just accused me of sleeping my way to funding," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "He did," Avery said, "and in doing so, he opened the door for us to respond with a full, factual timeline and a statement from the board. Within an hour, Vector Loom issued its first and only official statement on the matter. It was written by Lila Evans, our chairwoman, and signed by the entire board. Vector Loom Analytics stands in full, unwavering support of our CEO, Marin Eldridge. The personal attacks on her character are demonstrably false and libelous. The board is in full possession of the facts regarding the lawsuit, including forensic financial audits and personal correspondence, which entirely support Miss Eldridge's countersuit. Furthermore, the insinuation regarding our valued partner, Northbridge Capital, is offensive. Northbridge Capital is not an investor in Vector Loom. Vector Loom has taken 0 venture capital funding. It is 100% privately owned by its founder, Ms. Eldridge. The board considers this matter a private, legal dispute, but will not tolerate malicious, defamatory attacks on our company or its leadership. We have full faith in Ms. Eldridge. We are, as ever, guided by the data. It was a corporate execution. It stated, calmly and factually, 1. We have the receipts. 2. You lied about the funding. 3. You have no idea what you're talking about. The tide didn't just turn, it became a tidal wave. Graham Everett's name became a joke on financial Twitter. The nurse's story about Lionel was now being investigated by the Tribune. The Fathom Fellowship was lauded as a brilliant, compassionate move by a self-made founder. The final call came on Friday. It was the big one, a major, primetime news network. They wanted an exclusive, a sit-down, one-on-one interview with me. This is it, Marin, Seth said, his voice buzzing with excitement. This is the kill shot. You, in your own words, you can tell your story, the couch, the coffee shop, the code. You can show them the grandmother's letter. You can cry. It will be the end of them. It's your victory lap. I looked at the request on my screen, the producer's name, the proposed host. I saw the set in my mind, the soft lighting, the carefully selected, empathetic questions. They wanted a performance. They wanted the same thing Joanna had given them, just the other side of the coin. They wanted my tears. No, I said. Seth's face fell. No, Marin, this is the entire world watching. Exactly. And I'm not a performer. I'm a CEO. I'm not going to cry on television to win a popularity contest. This isn't a drama. It's a lawsuit. The facts are on the public record. So what do I tell them? Seth asked, defeated. Tell them, I appreciate the offer, but I'm too busy running my company. And then, I said, picking up a file from my desk, I want you to send this to the reporter who wrote the story about Mr. Harrison, the tech blogger. Seth looked at the file. What is it? It's a technical brief, I said. It's the original code for the library algorithm I wrote when I was 17. It's the technical patent for the cold start system that became the basis for VectorLoom's core technology. You want to send a tech patent to a reporter asking for an emotional interview? Yes, I said. They want my story? That's my story. It's not the tears. It's not the family. It's the work. The data doesn't lie. Let them print that. The media war had reached a fever pitch. It was a digital shouting match, a battle of narratives fought by columnists, television hosts, and anonymous commenters. My Fathom Fellowship announcement and the leak of my high school teacher's interview had provided a strong counter-narrative, but Graham and my parents were relentless, painting me as the cold, ungrateful daughter, the manufacturing defect who got lucky. We were in a stalemate, a war of public perception. I was in the war room with Avery, analyzing the sharp drop in positive public sentiment following one of Joanna's tearful local radio interviews. When my desk's intercom buzzed, it was Maya, my executive assistant, but her voice was laced with an unusual note of confusion. Ms. Eldridge, she said, I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a woman here, an elderly woman, named Evelyn Marwood. She has no appointment. The name hit me like a physical shock. Evelyn Marwood. I hadn't heard that name in, it had to be 20 years. It was a ghost. She's very insistent. Marin, Maya continued, her voice dropping. She says she's your grandmother's best friend. She says she has something for you, something she was supposed to keep safe. Avery looked up from her monitor, her eyes sharp. That's the name. From the trust, the witness. My blood went cold. Send her up. Maya, send her directly to the war room, and no one else. 5 minutes later, the reinforced glass door of the war room slid open. The woman who entered was a relic from another, more elegant world. She was tiny, perhaps 90 years old, frail as a bird, but she stood perfectly erect. She wore a simple, well-preserved tweed suit that must have been 30 years old, and a string of real, understated pearls. Her white hair was pinned in a neat twist, and her eyes, behind thick glasses, were a pale, piercing blue. They were eyes that had seen everything and forgotten nothing. She was clutching a very old, very worn, dark brown leather document satchel. It was cracked with age, the brass buckles tarnished, but she held it against her chest like a shield. "Marin?" she said. Her voice was thin, but clear as a bell. "My goodness, you look just like her, just like your grandmother." "Mrs. Marwood," I said, my voice coming out thicker than I expected. It's been a very long time." "It has, child," she said. She looked around the glass and steel room, at the monitors displaying stock tickers and social media feeds, as if it were a science fiction movie. "What a fortress you've built." Avery stood, projecting a quiet, respectful energy. "Mrs. Marwood, I'm Avery Stone, Ms. Eldridge's counsel." Evelyn turned her sharp blue eyes on Avery. "A lawyer. Good. Your grandmother always said, 'Get a good lawyer and a good tailor, and you can conquer the world.' She was right about one of them, at least." She advanced to the heavy basalt table in the center of the room. "I came as soon as I could. I saw your name in the papers. I saw what they're saying, what Joanna is saying." She said my mother's name with a quiet, ancient disdain. "I knew this day would come. I prayed it wouldn't. But your grandmother? She knew. She knew what her daughter was, and she knew what Lionel was." With deliberate, careful movements, she placed the old leather satchel on the table. Her knotted, arthritic fingers worked at the stiff buckles. "I was your grandmother's executor, dear," she said, not looking up. "And I was the witness to her will, but I was also the witness to her greatest fear. She was so proud of you. She saw you, that little girl with her head always in a book, always taking things apart, and she was terrified they would clip your wings. That's what she called it." The buckles finally sprang open. The bag exhaled the scent of old paper, leather, and something faint, like lavender. "She made me keep this," Evelyn said. "A duplicate original of the trust charter, not a copy, an original, signed by her, by the bank, by the notary, and by me, as witness." She said, "Evelyn, you hold on to this. Don't you dare give it to Joanna. You hold on to it, and if they ever break faith with that girl, you make it right." She pulled out a thick, folded piece of parchment. It was yellowed with age, brittle at the creases, and tied with a faded pale blue ribbon. She laid it on the table. My hand was shaking as I reached for it. The paper was heavy, textured. I untied the ribbon. Avery and I read it together. It was the charter, the legal, binding, inescapable truth, and there, halfway down the first page, was the clause. It was in bold, old-fashioned typeface, the ink still dark and definitive. "The funds contained within this trust," I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper, "in the amount of $140,000, are hereby designated for the college tuition and college-related expenses of my granddaughter, Marin Eldridge, only." The word "only" was capitalized and underlined. At the bottom, the signatures, my grandmother's, the bank officers, and, at the very bottom, a large, ornate, and deeply impressed notary seal. It was not a stamp. It was a raised, three-dimensional impression in the paper itself. "Mrs. Marwood," Avery said, her voice hushed with a litigator's reverence. "Is that the original embossed seal?" I was sitting right beside him when he pressed it. "Dear," Evelyn said, "it's as real as the day it was made." Avery looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flash of something that looked like triumph in her eyes. "Marin, the scanned letter from Joanna's USB. That was intent. That was the why. This is the how. This is the original, binding legal instrument. It's not just a smoking gun. It's the ballistic report, the fingerprints, and the weapon, all in one. The case for fraud is now absolute." "I tried to find you," Evelyn said, her voice soft with an ancient regret. "After your grandmother passed, I called. I heard rumors that you'd had a falling out. I called the house. Joanna. She was terrible. She told me you were troubled, that you'd run off, that you were unstable. Lionel got on the line. He's a very frightening man. He told me if I contacted the family again, he'd have me charged with harassment. I'm ashamed to say it, but I was scared. I didn't know where you'd gone. I had no one to give this to, until I saw your picture on that magazine cover last month. Avery was already on her terminal. Macy, get in here, now. Bring the macro kit. We have the original charter. The next hour was a blur of cold, precise action. Macy Loomis arrived, her librarian's bun even tighter, if possible. She handled the document with archival gloves. The war room transformed. High-resolution flatbed scanners digitized the charter. Avery's legal aides created certified, notarized copies. Macy set up a small, portable photography studio, taking high magnification, macro-lensed photos of the ink, the paper fibers, the signatures, and, most importantly, the deep, crisp impression of the notary's seal. It's perfect, Macy reported, her voice flat with professional satisfaction. This is an ironclad, unimpeachable expert report. This document is genuine, and it makes their family investment story a legal impossibility. It's not just a breach of trust, it's a felony. As they worked, Evelyn Marwood reached back into the worn leather bag. There's one more thing, she said, her voice softer. Your grandmother, she gave me this, too, a letter, for you. She sealed it and told me. She told me to give it to you only if the worst happened. If they truly betrayed her, I think, she said, her blue eyes meeting mine, that this qualifies. She handed me a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy, the paper thick. On the front, in my grandmother's spidery, elegant, left-leaning script, was a single word. Marin. I took it. I looked at Avery, at Macy, at the flurry of legal activity. I needed to be alone. I walked out of the war room, down the short hall, and into the silence of my own glass-walled office. The city skyline was a sharp, bright line of steel against the afternoon sun. I sat at my desk. I broke the wax seal, which had also been embossed, with her personal monogram. The letter was short. My dearest Marin, if you are reading this, it means they did what I prayed they wouldn't. They took your future, and they tried to make it their own. Do not let them. This is not about the money, my girl. It is about your honor. They will tell you that you are difficult. They will tell you that you are resilient, as if that gives them permission to wound you. They are wrong. You are not resilient. You are strong, and you were born to build. I have given Evelyn the tools. You use them. Fight for your future. It is yours, and yours alone. They may have been your origin, but you will be your own legacy. Reclaim what is yours. I love you. Grandma. I put the letter down on my desk, and for the first time since this all began, I cried. It was not a performance. It was not for a camera. It was a silent, racking breakdown in an empty glass office, 50 floors above the city. I wept for the woman who had seen me, truly seen me. I wept for the grandmother who had tried, from across the grave, to build a firewall around me, and I wept for the 18-year-old girl who had been forced to fight for 11 years, not knowing she'd had an army waiting in an old leather bag all along. The grief was a tidal wave, but it receded, leaving behind it a cold, hard beach of pure, tempered steel. I wiped my face. I folded the letter, carefully, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my blazer, against my heart. When I walked out of my office, Rowan was standing in the hallway. He must have been alerted by Maya. He didn't move toward me, didn't try to comfort me. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, a solid, unmovable presence. His eyes scanned my face, noting the redness, the resolve. Avery is ready, he said quietly. He understood. This was not a moment for comfort. This was a moment for action. We don't need to humiliate them, Marin, he said, his voice low and firm. We just need the truth. I know, I said, my voice clear, the thickness gone. And we finally have all of it. I walked back into the war room. The atmosphere had changed. It was no longer a defensive unit. It was an arsenal. Avery was on the phone, standing tall, her voice like ice. That is correct. We are filing the full countersuit. Breach of fiduciary duty, civil embezzlement, constructive fraud, conversion, punitive damages in the amount of $5 million. She listened. No, this isn't a negotiating tactic. This is a filing. It's on the public docket, as of right now. She hung up and looked at me. A single, sharp nod. It's done. The suit is live. She immediately picked up another line. Mr. Graham Everett, please, this is Avery Stone. Tell him it's regarding the Whitaker Eldridge case. He will take the call. She was on hold for no more than 10 seconds. Graham, she said, her voice suddenly light, almost casual. Avery Stone, I'm just giving you a professional courtesy. My full countersuit just hit the public docket. A server is on his way to your office right now. I wanted you to pay special attention to the exhibits. She paused, listening. Oh, you've seen our exhibits? No. You've seen the scanned ones. I'm talking about the new attachments, Exhibit D and Exhibit E. Exhibit D is the original, embossed, notarized charter of the Eldridge Educational Trust, the one that explicitly, and in capital letters, forbids the fund's use for anything but my client's tuition. A longer pause. I could almost hear the blood draining from his face. Oh, it's quite genuine, Avery continued, lightly. My forensics team has already certified it. The original, living witness to the document, a Mrs. Evelyn Marwood, is in my office right now. She's given a full sworn deposition. That's Exhibit E. She listened again, then gave a short, cold laugh. No, I don't think we're interested in a private settlement, but I am, as a second courtesy, having a messenger run over a draft of our first motion. It's a request for a full asset freeze and a forensic examination of every account Dr. Whitaker has held for the last 15 years, including his offshore holdings. We're looking for those malpractice settlements. You see, my accounting team seems to think your client's entire lawsuit is a bad faith, fraudulent attempt to shield assets from his other creditors, which is, well, it's a RICO-level problem for him and for his counsel. I just thought you should see it, she concluded, her voice turning to ice. Before you read about it in the Tribune, you have a good day now. She hung up the phone. She looked at me. The warning shot is fired. The ground is now theirs to cede. They have 48 hours to respond before that motion for the asset freeze goes live. The war room was silent. The media war was over. The real war had just begun. Avery's draft motion for the asset freeze was a declaration of war, and we had given them 48 hours to contemplate their surrender. The clock was ticking. The first crack in their fortress appeared with 24 hours to spare. It wasn't a call from Graham Everett. It was a blocked number on my personal cell, a number I only gave to my executive team and Rowan. I was in my office, long after midnight, watching the city lights blur. I answered. I also, on Avery's standing advice, pressed the record button. Illinois is a one-party consent state. Hello? A sharp, terrified inhale on the other end. Marin, it's me, I felt nothing, no surprise, no pity. Hello, Isolde. You have to stop this, she whispered. Her voice was not the polished, brittle instrument from the gala. It was the thin, reedy wail of a child who had just had her favorite toy broken. Stop what, exactly? This, all of it, this thing you're doing, she hissed. Avery called Graham. She's talking about freezing assets. Our assets. Graham he's losing his mind. His partners are asking questions. You're making him look like a fool. You're making me look like a fool. I am responding to a $5 million lawsuit, I said, my voice perfectly level. Oh, God. The money. Is that all you think about? She cried. Listen, just Listen, we can fix this. Just us. We don't need the lawyers. We can make a deal. A private settlement. A settlement, I repeated. Yes, we'll tell the papers it was all a big misunderstanding. A family spat. You can, I don't know, you can say you're reviewing your family's financial needs, and in return, you stop. You call off your attack dog. You tell her to stop this motion. So, I would lie, I said. And in return, you would, what? Apologize for suing me? I need this to go away, she shrieked, all pretense of negotiation evaporating. You're ruining my wedding. You're ruining everything. I am simply presenting the facts. Izzy, facts which, by the way, include my stolen college fund. That, finally, brought the indignation. Stolen. God, you are always so dramatic. It wasn't stolen. Her voice cracked, a high-pitched spike of pure, privileged fury. It was a social investment. Everyone agreed. That money was for status. It got me into Aspen. It got me the contacts. It got me Graham. It's what that money was for. You would have just wasted it on books. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. The admission, clean and bright and poisonous. A social investment, I said, savoring the term. I see. Thank you for clarifying. Isolde. Just fix it, she sobbed. If you ruin this for me, if Graham leaves, I'll never forgive you. You sued me for $5 million. Izzy, I think we're past the point of forgiveness. Goodbye. I hung up. I saved the audio file, time-stamped, and emailed it to Avery with the subject line, Exhibit F, the social investment. The next move came from the king. It was the following night. The deadline for the asset freeze motion was 10 a.m. the next morning. I had stayed at the office, reviewing the final petition with Avery's team. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I took the private elevator down to the executive garage. The vast, subterranean space was silent, the concrete and steel amplifying the hum of the fluorescent lights. I was halfway to my car when a figure stepped out from behind a concrete support pillar. My hand flew to the panic button on my key fob, but I stopped. My security detail, 2 floors up, would be alerted, but I didn't press it. It was Lionel. He didn't look like a god surgeon. He didn't look like the patriarch from the gala. He looked small. His expensive suit was rumpled. His face was a grayish-white, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. "Marin," he said. His voice was a dry, broken rasp. I stopped. I kept 10 feet of cold, polished concrete between us. "You shouldn't be here. Lionel, this is private property. You're violating the terms of your own lawsuit. You're not allowed to contact me." "Forget the lawyers," he said. Taking a step, I took a step back. This is just a conversation, father to daughter." "We are not that," I said, my voice echoing in the empty garage. "You are the plaintiff. I am the defendant. You have 60 seconds to leave before I call the police." "You did this," he whispered, his eyes darting around the empty garage as if the walls were listening. This malpractice thing, the Tribune, the bloggers, they're calling the hospital, they're calling the medical board. You leaked this. You're destroying my reputation." "I did nothing," I said. "I presented the facts of my own case. It seems the truth has a way of attracting more truth. People are digging. They're finding things." We can fix this," he said, his voice urgent, pleading. "Both of us. You stop. You call off this lawsuit. This asset freeze. It's catastrophic. Just stop." In exchange for what? This was it, the offer. We can adjust the narrative," he said, the words tumbling out. "Publicly, we all agree, a truce. We issue a joint statement. A family misunderstanding, now resolved. You You say you're taking care of us, and I? And you? I'll fix my end, he said, his eyes wild. The malpractice. The reporters? I'll tell them you had nothing to do with it. I'll make a statement. I'll keep your name out of it. We just need this to stop. I stared at him. He wasn't just offering a truce. He was offering a quid pro quo. He was offering to obstruct the investigation into his own professional ruin. If I helped him hide his assets, he was drowning, and he was trying to trade one crime for another. Get out, I said. Marin, please. Get out of my garage, now. He flinched, as if I had struck him. The god surgeon deflated, turning into a gray, rumpled old man. He turned, and, without another word, walked toward the exit ramp, his expensive shoes scuffing on the concrete. The war room was electric the next morning, 9 a.m., 1 hour to filing. I relayed my conversations with Izzy and Lionel. Avery listened, her face a mask of stone, and then a slow, cold smile spread across her lips. Good, she said. The audio of Izzy is admissible as an admission against interest. His appearance in the garage is witness intimidation. They are in full, disorganized panic. They know the motion is coming. They know it will work. Her assistant buzzed. Mr. Graham Everett on line 1. He's screaming. He demands to speak to you. Avery's smile widened. Oh, wonderful. Put him on speaker. A blast of raw, incoherent fury filled the room. Absolutely not. Avery, you listen to me. You cannot file that motion. I will. Good morning, Graham, Avery said, her voice like a cool cloth. You stop this! You stop this now! He roared. You think this is a game? You file that motion, and I will unleash a discovery process on your client that will make her wish she'd never been born. I will dig up everything, every man she's ever dated, every late-night text. Her entire love life will be on the front page of the Tribune. You stop this, now. The room was silent, the echo of his voice hanging in the air. Avery waited a beat, gravely. She sipped her tea. Graham, she said, her voice dangerously light. Are you quite finished? Wonderful. First, thank you for that performance. This call, like all calls to my firm, is being recorded. Your threats of using discovery for public humiliation and intimidation are duly noted. A strangled sound came from the speaker. Second, Avery continued. Discovery? Oh, Graham, please. We welcome discovery. By all means, dig. But while you're fruitlessly trying to find a narrative in my client's love life, which, by the way, is immaculate, we'll be starting with something much more tangible. She paused, for effect. We'll be starting with your fiancé's bank statements from 11 years ago, the ones that show a couture dress from Paris and a 5-star hotel in Aspen, all paid for with stolen funds. Or perhaps we'll start with the audio file I just received, where Ms. Isolde Whitaker herself admits, in her own words, that she knew the money was stolen and calls it a social investment. Which one do you think the Tribune would prefer? The silence from the speaker was absolute. You think you can sling mud? Graham, Avery said, her voice dropping, turning to ice. We are holding a mountain of facts. If you so much as leak one more word about Marin's personal life, I will not only file the asset freeze, I will personally release the entire Kite and Loomis forensic accounting report, including the malpractice connection, the society page payoffs, and the social investment audio, to every media outlet in this city. You want to play dirty? Go ahead. We'll play clean. But we will play with the truth, and I assure you, it will be so much worse for you. She hung up the phone, as if on cue. Rowan called my personal line. Marin, just a heads up, Northbridge just issued a formal public statement. What? It's simple, he said, his voice calm, steady. A clarification. In light of recent media speculation, Northbridge Capital wishes to clarify that it holds no financial stake in Vector Loom Analytics. Nor does it have any business dealings with Whitaker Surgical. That's it. Clean. You're separating yourself, I said, a cold knot in my stomach. No, he said, firmly. I'm taking away their last weapon. Graham can't attack you by attacking me. He can't claim I'm funding your lawsuit or that this is a conflict of interest. This makes it clean. This is your fight, your company, your truth. I'm just clearing the targets from the board. He was right. It was a brilliant, selfless, strategic move. Macy Loomis walked in, holding a single, slim file. The final subpoena came through, she said, her voice flat. The bank that held the original trust. They had a safe deposit box associated with the estate. Joanna kept it active. The bank inventoried it this morning before we freeze it. She put a list on the main screen, an inventory. 1 pair pearl earrings. 1 child's locket. 1 stack of laminated photographs. 1 manila envelope containing receipts. Receipts? Avery asked. The originals, Macy said. The paper copies. The invoice from Atelier Dubois. The final bill from the Gilded Stag. And the photos. She clicked. A scanned image appeared. A Polaroid. Izzy, in the couture gown, at the party, laughing, holding a glass of champagne. The date was printed in the white border. It was 1 week after they had changed the locks on me. My mother hadn't just spent the money. She had kept souvenirs. She had kept the trophies of her crime locked away in a bank vault, a secret hoard of her victory. A final package arrived by courier. It was from Evelyn Marwood. Inside, there was no note. Just one. Final. Faded Polaroid. I picked it up. It was me. I was 17. I was standing on the front lawn of the Rivermere house, in the bright sunlight, grinning, holding up a letter. I looked. Joyful. What is it? Avery asked, gently. It's the scholarship letter, I whispered. From the University of Chicago. It was a full ride. I'd forgotten. Evelyn must have taken this picture. The scholarship you never took, Avery said. The one they refused to let me accept, I said. They said it looked bad for the family, to accept charity. They said I was family, and the family would provide. They made me turn it down. It was 2 months before they had me sign the paper. They hadn't just stolen the trust. They had stolen the scholarship first. They had boxed me in, removed all my options, until the only thing left was the one thing they could steal. The final blow landed at 9:30 a.m., the Chicago Tribune, not a blogger, not a gossip columnist, the Tribune, the front page of the editorial section. The headline was vast. When filial piety becomes extortion, the weaponization of family law in the Whitaker case. It was a scathing, brilliant, logical dismantling of their entire case. It cited the history of the archaic law. It cited the curious timing of Dr. Whitaker's malpractice suits. It cited the convenient $5 million figure. It called their lawsuit a gross, cynical abuse of the public trust and the judicial system. The war was over. The public, the press, the legal community. The tide had not just turned, it was a tsunami. Avery's email pinged, a single, sharp sound in the silent, victorious room. It was from the court. We've been ordered, she said, reading. The judge just read the Tribune editorial. He's seen the media circus. He wants this off his docket. He's not dismissing. Not yet. He's ordering mandatory mediation. He wants us to settle, I said. He wants us in a room, Avery corrected, her face grim. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., he's clearing his calendar. It's a binding session. I looked out the window, the war of shadows, the flanking maneuvers, the secret phone calls. It was over. It was time for the final battle, not in the press, not in a garage, in a sterile, windowless room with a long table and cold fluorescent lights. The room was beige. It was a beige, windowless box on the 14th floor of the county building, designed for maximum neutrality and quiet despair. The walls were beige. The industrial carpet was beige. and the long, scuffed laminate table between us was a streaky, pale imitation of wood. The air was dry, smelling of stale coffee and the ozone hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The lights made an audible, high-pitched whine, a sound designed to set a human nervous system on edge. We sat on one side, me, in a dark gray suit, and Avery Stone, who had a single, slim file in front of her. They sat on the other, Lionel, his face a waxy, gray mask, the image of the god surgeon completely shattered, Joanna, who was attempting to project an aura of wronged maternal grace, but whose eyes were hard and flat, Isolde, who was staring fixedly at the table veneer, as if trying to find a pattern in the fake wood grain, and Graham Everett. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 straight days, his expensive suit rumpled, a film of sweat on his upper lip. At the head of the table sat Mr. Harrison, the court-appointed mediator. He was a man with tired, bloodhound eyes, who looked as if he had personally absorbed every divorce, failed partnership, and broken contract in the city of Chicago. "This is a binding, mandatory mediation," Harrison said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Everything said in this room is confidential and cannot be used in court. Save for a final, signed agreement, the court is strongly encouraging a resolution today. Mr. Everett, your clients are the plaintiffs. You may begin." Graham cleared his throat. It was a wet, nervous sound. He shuffled his papers, attempting to gather the scraps of his dignity. "Thank you. Mr. Harrison, my clients, Dr. and Mrs. Whitaker, they are here in good faith. We can dispense with the recent media theatrics. The fact remains. They are the parents. Ms. Eldridge is the child. Family is a duty. The law recognizes this. We are here today." He took a shaky breath. "To discuss the $5 million they are owed for their support." The words hung in the stale, beige air. $5 million, the last desperate echo of their arrogance. The mediator looked at me. "Ms. Eldridge? Ms. Stone?" I remained perfectly still, my hands folded, my gaze fixed on the center of the table. Avery Stone let the silence stretch. She let them sit in the room with the sound of their own extortion. Lionel fidgeted. Joanna, seeing her cue, produced a tissue and dabbed at her dry eyes. Finally, Avery leaned forward, just inches. She did not raise her voice. "We are not here to discuss duty. Mr. Everett, we are here to discuss civil embezzlement." Graham sputtered. "That is an outrageous, unfounded, and libelous assertion." "Is it?" Avery's voice was light, clinical. She reached for her single file. She opened it. She slid the first document, a laminated single page, across the table. It stopped directly in front of Lionel. "Exhibit A," Avery said, her voice a cool narrator in the quiet room. "A bank statement from the Eldridge Educational Trust. Balance as of March 5th, 11 years ago, $140,000. She slid a second piece of paper. "Exhibit B, a power of attorney, signed by my client, then 18, granting her parents control of that trust, obtained under false pretenses, as we know from Exhibit C." She slid a third piece of paper, the scanned email. "Not college material. Use the funds for Izzy. Build status." "And now," Avery said, "the fun part." She slid a fourth document. "Exhibit D, a statement from the Whitaker Family Holdings Trust, dated March 9th, 11 years ago, 72 hours after my client was locked out of her family home. It shows a series of wire transfers totaling $138,500, the entire value of her college fund, drained." She then opened a new file, and for the first time, she began to place, not slide, the evidence. Each one landed with a soft, final slap. "Exhibit E, the receipts, $50,000, slap. The Gilded Stag, Aspen, deposit for the winter cotillion." Joanna's head snapped up. Her eyes were no longer performing. They were wide with shock. $45,000, slap. Atelier du Bois, Paris, for one bespoke couture gown. Izzy, who had not moved, flinched. She made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat. $10,000, slap. Aspen Logistics and Limousine, $5,000 for orchestra, $3,000 for florals. It's a perfect match. Gentlemen, to the dollar. Avery placed her hands on the table. You stole her education to pay for your other daughter's party. Graham was paper white. This is circumstantial. A family misunderstanding. I'm not finished, Avery said. She pulled out the heavy, parchment paper document, the one that smelled of lavender and old leather. Exhibit F, the original, notarized, an embossed trust charter. Not a copy. The original, the one my client's grandmother wrote. She leaned in, and though her voice was still quiet, it cut through the room like a scalpel. She tapped the bolded line. It explicitly, and in capital letters, states, "For college tuition only." She then looked at the mediator. Mr. Harrison, the 90-year-old woman who witnessed and co-signed this document, Mrs. Evelyn Marwood, is waiting in the hall. She has given a sworn videotape deposition. She is also, however, very eager to see Mrs. Whitaker again. Joanna looked, for the first time in her life, like a cornered animal. She looked at the door, then at Avery, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. And finally, Avery said, turning back to the table, as to the misunderstanding, my client's sister, Isolde, clarified the family's position just 2 nights ago. She placed a small, digital audio player on the table. Mr. Harrison, this is Exhibit G. As this is a confidential mediation, I will not play it for the room. I will play it only for you, and for opposing counsel. She handed the player and a single earpiece to the mediator. He looked at her, then at Graham. He sighed, the sigh of a man who just wanted to get to lunch. He put the earpiece in. Avery pressed play. We all watched Harrison's face. It was impassive. He listened. His eyes, just for a second, flickered toward Izzy. He listened for 30 seconds. We heard the faint, tinny, panicked shriek from the small plastic bud. It wasn't stolen. It was a social investment. It's what that money was for. You would have just wasted it on books. The mediator took the earpiece out. He placed it carefully on the table, as if it were contaminated. He looked at Graham Everett. His tired, bloodhound eyes were now cold and sharp. Graham's face was slick with sweat. He was ruined. His career was over. He knew it. Avery Stone folded her hands. The room was silent, save for the hum of the lights. Sss. So, Avery said, her voice dropping to a conversational, almost pleasant tone. Let's summarize. You filed a $5 million frivolous lawsuit, based on a law you're misinterpreting, in a bad faith attempt to shield assets from pending malpractice litigation. Lionel stopped breathing. In response, Avery continued, we have filed a countersuit, because in the state of Illinois, what we are looking at on this table is not a family dispute. It is civil embezzlement within a trust. It is constructive fraud. It is conversion. Our countersuit, as you know, is for the full $140,000, plus 11 years of statutory interest, plus all associated legal fees, and of course, $5 million in punitive damages. We are, in fact, prepared to take this to a jury. I think they will find Mrs. Marwood very, very compelling. Avery let the words land. And we will, of course, be filing all of this with the Illinois Bar, regarding Mr. Everett's threats, and with the IRS, regarding the fraudulent trust. Graham Everett held up a single, trembling hand. Please, a moment. We request a pause, to confer, privately. Granted, Harrison said, looking at his watch. 10 minutes. The 4 of them scrambled out of the room, a disorganized, panicked retreat. Avery and I sat in silence. The room was still beige. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Only Graham and Lionel returned. Graham's face was gray. He looked like he had aged a decade. Lionel looked utterly and completely broken. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the carpet. "My clients," Graham choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. They are prepared to withdraw their lawsuit, in its entirety, with prejudice." He looked at Avery, a look of pathetic, begging hope. Avery did not look at him. She looked at me. The mediator looked at me. "Ms. Eldridge, this is your mediation." This was the moment. The kill shot. I could say no. I could say, "See you in court." I could take every last dime from them. I could force Lionel into bankruptcy. I could ruin them, publicly and financially. And I would be entirely and legally justified. I looked at Lionel, the great Dr. Whitaker, the God surgeon who had held my future in his hands and crushed it because it was an inconvenience. He was just a small, frightened old man in a cheap, beige room. I felt nothing, no rage, no triumph, not even pity. I felt the cold, clean peace of a database finally, perfectly balanced. I was done. "We will agree to drop our countersuit," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the small, ugly room. Graham closed his eyes in relief. "On 3 conditions," I said. His eyes snapped open. "Anything!" "En moi," I said, looking from Lionel to Graham. "My company and I are granted a permanent, binding court-ordered restraining order against all of you. Lionel, Joanna, Isolde, and you. Mr. Everett, you will never contact me, my employees, or my partners again. You will never come within 500 feet of my home or my offices. You will never speak my name, or the name of Vector Loom, in public or in private, for any reason, ever again. If you do, it will trigger an immediate, non-negotiable confession of judgment for the full $5 million countersuit." Graham just nodded, numb. 2, I continued. "I don't want your money. I don't want your apology. The statute of limitations for that has long since passed." I turned, for the first time, and looked directly at Lionel. "You two," I said, meaning him and Joanna, "will apologize to her." "Her?" Lionel whispered, confused. "You will write a formal, notarized letter of apology to Mrs. Evelyn Marwood for the distress you caused her, for the lies you told her, for the violation of her best friend's dying wish, which you forced her to witness. Avery will approve the text. She will receive the notarized copy. The original will be delivered to Evelyn." Lionel's face, impossibly, went paler. He was being asked to apologize, not for the theft, but for the breach of honor. It was the one thing that still mattered in his ruined world. "And 3, I said, "you sign it, today, now." The mediator, who had been watching this all like a tennis match, finally moved. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. "This is the standard binding mediation agreement. Ms. Stone, I assume you have the addendum?" "I do," Avery said, pulling a final crisp document from her file. "The restraining order and the apology clause." For the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the beige room was the high-pitched whine of the lights and the heavy, wet scratch of pens on paper. Lionel's hand was shaking so badly he could barely sign his name. Graham signed, his signature a frantic, desperate scribble. Avery signed. I signed. The sound of the pens was the sound of a key turning in a very old, very heavy lock. It was the sound of a door being shut. Finally, on a cold, dark room I had been trapped in for 11 years. Mr. Harrison gathered the papers. "Congratulations," he said, his voice flat. "This mediation is concluded." The chains were broken. I walked out of the beige room and did not look back. I took the elevator down, alone, and walked out of the county building into the bright, sharp, indifferent Chicago afternoon. I didn't get into a car. I just walked. I walked for blocks, letting the city noise, the traffic, the sirens, the shouting, the wind funneling between the skyscrapers, wash over me, scouring the last, filthy residue of that room from my skin. I did not return to the office that day. I went home. slept for 10 solid hours, and when I woke up, the world was, for the first time in my adult life, quiet. The next morning, I walked onto the data floor at Vector Loom. The silence was different. It was not the tense, whispering quiet of the past few weeks. It was a deep, focused, humming silence, a silence of respect. My analysts and coders, the people who had sat with me through the storm, looked up as I passed. They didn't cheer. They didn't pry. They just nodded and went back to work. The data was clean. The case was closed. My first act was not to review the market reports. It was to call an all-hands meeting in the central atrium. I stood on the small dais, without a podium, looking out at the hundreds of faces that represented my real life, the one I had built. "Good morning," I said. My voice was clear, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. "As you know, the company and I have been the subject of a public and personal legal dispute. As of yesterday afternoon, that dispute is resolved. The terms are private, but the outcome is not. Vector Loom's integrity was questioned, and it has been affirmed." I paused. This was never just about a lawsuit. It was about a principle. 2 weeks ago, in the middle of this, we announced the Fathom Fellowship. Today, we are renaming it. It is now, and will be from this day forward, the Marwood Promise Scholarship. I saw a few people from the legal team, who knew her name, look up sharply. "It is named for a woman," I continued, "who kept a promise for decades, a woman who believed in a future that others tried to steal, and who had the courage to guard that truth. This scholarship will no longer be just a program. It is now a core part of our corporate charter. We will find the builders. We will find the minds whose families have tried to clip their wings, and we will give them, in the name of Evelyn Marwood and my grandmother, a promise. We will help them fly." The applause that followed was not the loud, frantic applause of a gala. It was deep, sustained, and real. The story, no longer a family drama, had been absorbed into the company's DNA. It was not a story of revenge. It was a story of integrity. It became our founding myth. Of course, some people could not read the data. Joanna did not understand that a court-ordered document was real. For her, the signature in that beige room was just another inconvenient piece of paper. The real connection, the umbilical cord of maternal right, was, in her mind, still intact. The calls started the next day. They flooded the main Vector Loom switchboard. "I need to speak to my daughter. This is Mrs. Whitaker. Put me through to Marin. It's a family emergency." 10 calls, 20, by the afternoon. She had called 53 times. My executive team, led by Maya, was polite, firm, and immovable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Ms. Eldridge is not available. She is in a meeting." After the 53rd call, I instructed Maya to do one last thing. She did not block the number. She had Avery's office send a final, non-negotiable package by bonded courier to Joanna's home in Rivermere. It was a certified, court-stamped copy of the permanent, 500-foot restraining order, a simple, paper translation of the word no. The calls stopped. The aftershocks rippled outward, quietly, with the force of an earthquake. The social investment had defaulted. Graham Everett, above all else, was a creature of his firm, a man whose entire identity was built on reputation and good family, a fiancé who was a proven, admitted co-conspirator in a high-profile fraud case was not, as it turned out. Good family. I didn't read about it in a gossip column. I saw it in the public listings. Izzy's luxurious Gold Coast apartment, the one Graham had secured for her, was listed for sale. The wedding, as the Rivermere Society page failed to mention, was indefinitely postponed. In fact, the Rivermere Society page, after receiving a blistering non-confidential letter from Avery regarding their role in the paid-for PR campaign from 11 years ago, quietly scrubbed their entire digital archive of any mention of Isolde Whitaker's Aspen debut. The receipts were gone. The party, in the eyes of the internet, had never happened. Izzy had been erased. And then there was Lionel. His name was now inextricably linked to a failed, frivolous, and fraudulent lawsuit. The Chicago Tribune was no longer interested in his family drama. They were, however, intensely interested in the malpractice suit. The nurse's story, once an anonymous whisper, had been corroborated. 2 other families had come forward, their own settlements suddenly and suspiciously in question. Lakeview Medical Center, facing a public relations catastrophe, put him on indefinite administrative leave. His lawyers tried to spin it as a voluntary sabbatical for personal reasons. The press, sensing the new narrative, hounded my office. "Ms. Eldridge, do you have a comment on the investigation into your father's surgical practices? Are you cooperating with the Illinois Medical Board? Was your lawsuit related to his professional misconduct?" My response, delivered by a relieved and composed Seth, was always the same. "We have no comment on matters entirely unrelated to vector loom analytics." I refused to participate. I would not kick the drowning man. I would simply let him drown in the water he had poisoned himself. His end was his own. It had nothing to do with me. That Friday, Rowan took me to dinner. He didn't choose a flashy, celebratory restaurant. He took me to a quiet, dark, wood-paneled room in a converted university library. We sat in a high-backed booth, surrounded by the smell of old books and leather. We sat for an hour, just breathing. I knew he had been planning to propose. I had seen the way he looked at me for months, the way he'd been guarding me, waiting for the storm to pass. He didn't bring a ring. He didn't make a grand gesture. He just reached across the polished oak table and took my hand. His was warm and solid. "You closed the loop," he said, his voice low. I did. "It's over." "It's over," I agreed. He nodded, raising his water glass in a silent toast. "To what comes next?" He knew, without me saying it, that I needed this. I needed to stand on my own, on this new, solid ground, before I could build anything else with anyone else. I needed to finish this chapter, fully, before starting a new one. He was giving me that space. He was respecting the boundary I had just fought to build. It was, perhaps, the most profound and romantic thing he could have possibly done. The following week, Evelyn Marwood visited the office. She did not come to the war room. I met her in my own glass-walled office, the sun streaming in, illuminating the city. She was no longer clutching her leather satchel. She looked lighter. The weight of a 50-year-old promise finally lifted. "I received a letter," she said, her voice soft. "Delivered by a very serious-looking man in a suit. It was very thorough and notarized." "I am so glad," I said. "Evelyn, you are the one who deserves the apology and the thanks." "I just did what she asked, dear." She smiled. "I have something for you," I said. I brought out a large, flat, beautifully wrapped gift. She opened it with her small, knotted hands. It was the original trust charter, the one she had kept safe in her bag for all those years. I had had it professionally restored, the creases smoothed, the ancient parchment stabilized. It was mounted in a simple, elegant museum-quality frame under ultraviolet protective glass. Beside it, in the same frame, I had placed a restored copy of my grandmother's letter, the one that said, "Do not clip her wings." "This," I said, "belongs to the woman who kept the promise, the woman who made sure I could fly." She touched the glass, her fingers tracing my grandmother's faint, spidery signature. "Oh, Marin," she whispered, her eyes shining. "She would be so proud of you. Not for this company, not for the money, but for this, for the honor." 2 weeks later, I signed the largest contract in Vector Loom's history. It was a partnership with a major university hospital system, not Lakeview, to build an ethical data model for predictive patient outcomes. Our models would help surgeons identify high-risk cases before they failed. Our contract, which I had personally drafted the language for, included a non-negotiable clause on data ethics and absolute patient transparency. We were building a future based on saving lives, not hiding failures. It was the exact diametric opposite of the path Lionel had taken. That night, I stood at the window of my apartment, the same vast expanse of glass I had pressed my forehead against in despair just weeks before. The lake was a sheet of black, mirrored glass below, the city a living grid of light. I thought about that night, 11 years ago. Standing on the perfect brick porch in the late March snow, the wind had been so cold, a wet, stinging, physical assault, a cold that I felt had seeped into my bones and never, ever truly left. But standing there now, in the quiet of my own home, the home I had built, I realized something. I wasn't cold. The internal frost, the chill I had carried as a shield and a weapon for over a decade, was gone. It had finally, after all this time, melted. I turned away from the window, and my laptop pinged, a final email. From the Aurora Foundation. Subject, invitation to be keynote speaker. I opened it. Dear Ms. Eldridge, we are writing to formally invite you to be the keynote speaker at next year's Lakefront Philanthropy Gala, after the unfortunate misunderstanding at this year's event, and in light of your company's new Marwood Promise. We would be honored if you would speak on your remarkable journey, perhaps a topic like talent beyond a degree or building a new legacy. I smiled. The gala, the place where it had all begun, the place where Lionel had tried to have me thrown out like trash. They were inviting me back, to be the main event. I hit reply. I thought for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keys. Then I typed, "Thank you for the invitation. I accept." It has been 1 year. I stood in the wings of the grand ballroom at the Peregrine Hotel. The same room, the same chandeliers, like frozen explosions, the same scent of champagne and expensive perfume, the same murmur of Chicago's elite. But this time, I was not an unknown. I was not a manufacturing defect hiding on the balcony. This time, I was the keynote speaker. And now, the director of the Aurora Foundation said, her voice bright, a woman who truly embodies this year's theme of building a new legacy. She has redefined her industry, championed data ethics, and through her own remarkable journey, has shown us what it truly means to build from the ground up. Please welcome the CEO of Vector Loom Analytics, Ms. Marin Eldridge. The applause was a wall of sound. I walked out from the darkness of the wings into a single, brilliant white spotlight. I was wearing black, not the simple, minimalist sheath from the year before, but a structured, architectural dress that was part armor, part art. I walked to the center of the vast stage. The room was packed. 500 of the city's most powerful people, their faces turned up to me, expectant. I stood at the podium, a simple, clear block of acrylic. I let the applause die. I let the silence settle, let it stretch until it was almost uncomfortable. I looked out into the crowd, my gaze steady. You will never use a degree. I let the words land. I heard the sharp, collective intake of breath. I saw the confusion, the mild shock. In the front row, a few of the foundation's board members looked at each other, their smiles faltering. That, I continued, my voice perfectly level, carrying over the microphone, is what my father told me when I was 18. He was explaining why my college fund, a fund left by my grandmother, specifically and only for my education, was being liquidated to pay for my sister's debutante season in Aspen. The silence in the room was no longer just polite, it was absolute. He told me I was not college material. He told me a degree would be a waste of money, and then he had the locks on my home changed. I was given 2 suitcases and left on the street, in the snow. I paused. I could see them. They were waiting for the next part of the script. They were waiting for the tears. They were waiting for the rags to riches, emotional, made-for-TV story of the poor, abandoned girl. I am not here tonight to tell you that story, I said, my voice hardening, just slightly. We are not here to talk about my feelings. We are here to talk about data, and the data is this. We are a society that is obsessed with pedigree. but we are blind to potential. We are willing to spend millions on a social investment for one child, while telling another that their education is a waste. Behind me, a 100-foot LED screen lit up. It was not a picture of my family. It was not a picture of me, crying in the snow. It was a chart, a stark, beautiful, brutal line graph. This, I said, gesturing to the screen, is the data. This is the percentage of gifted, low-income students who are accepted to top-tier universities, and this, a red line appeared, plummeting, is the percentage of them who actually graduate, not because they fail, but because they are pushed out, by families who do not understand, by systems that do not support them, by the crushing, quiet theft of their confidence, and sometimes the theft of their money. I walked away from the podium, pacing the stage, my voice filling the room. My story is not unique. It's just a single, well-documented data point. The world is full of Marins. It is full of young people with diamond-hard minds who are told they are resilient, which is just an excuse to wound them. It is full of people who are told, "You'll never use a degree," by the very people who are supposed to protect them. I stopped at the center of the stage. Last year, my company, Vector Loom, launched the Marwood Promise Scholarship, named for the 90-year-old woman who guarded the truth for me. Tonight, I am announcing its new sister program, a $5 million endowment from my personal funds. The screen behind me changed. Bold, clean white letters on a black background. It is called, I said, the Never Use a Degree Fund. A ripple of stunned laughter, of understanding, moved through the crowd. This fund, I explained, will do one thing. It will provide immediate, no questions asked legal and financial support for any student in this state whose family is attempting to coercively block their education, or as in my case, steal their educational funds. We will provide the lawyers. We will provide the forensic accountants. We will protect the promise. The applause this time was not polite. It was a roar. I held up a hand. I did not build this fund as an act of charity. I built it as an act of logic. We are hemorrhaging talent. We are letting diamonds fall through the cracks because we are too obsessed with the velvet box they are supposed to come in. This is not philanthropy. This is a market correction. My gaze scanned the room, and I saw him. He was in the back, not at a table, but standing near the exit, by a server's station. Graham Everett IV. He was not in a $1,000 suit. He was thinner, his face hollowed out. He looked irrelevant. He was just a man, in a room, watching his past. I had not invited him. He must have come on someone else's ticket, a ghost at the feast, needing to see, for himself, how it all ended. Our eyes met, across the vast, glittering expanse. I took a breath. For 11 years, I said, my voice resonating, I was hunted by this story. I was told that family is a duty, that filial piety is a law, and it is, but in the last year, I was forced to learn a new, harder lesson, a lesson some people, my eyes stayed locked on Graham, never learn. I watched him. He was frozen. That when filial piety is turned into a $5 million extortion plot, it is no longer duty, it is a crime. Graham Everett flinched. He looked down. He looked at the floor, at his shoes, and then, quietly, without a sound, he turned, pushed open the heavy ballroom door, and was gone. He just left. He had erased himself. I brought my attention back to the light. But this is not just about bad data, I said, my voice softening. Just a fraction. It is also about healing. You cannot just delete a corrupt file. You must replace it with a clean one. You cannot just expose a lie. You must replace it with a healing truth. And I am not the only one here tonight with a story about that. A new spotlight opened on the side of the stage. A woman, in her late 50s, with kind, nervous eyes and a simple blue dress, walked out. I had invited her personally. "This is Mrs. Allen," I said. "She has a story, and she has graciously agreed to share it." Mrs. Alan walked to the podium. She was trembling, but she gripped its sides. "Hello," she said, her voice soft, but the microphone carried it. I'm not like Ms. Eldridge. I'm not a CEO. I'm a high school librarian. 4 years ago, I got very sick. I needed a complex heart procedure. I went to a celebrated surgeon, a man everyone said was a god, a man who made a mistake, a terrible mistake. The room was so quiet. I could hear the ice shifting in 1,000 glasses. He used a part that was not approved, she said, her voice shaking. And it failed. I was dying. And he told my family it was just my bad luck, that nothing could be done. He told us it was over. She paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. But another doctor, a younger doctor, at a different hospital, she found my file. She used a new data sharing system. She saw the error. She saw the device he had used. And she called my husband. She said, "I think I can fix this." And she did. She rebuilt what he had broken. She saved my life. Mrs. Allen was weeping now, quiet, grateful tears. I am not here to point fingers. I'm not here to name the man who failed me. I am here to thank the system that saved me. The data, the transparency, the ethics that allowed a good doctor to fix the bad. That, she looked at me, her eyes shining, is the legacy, not the failure, the repair. She stepped back, and the room exploded. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated emotion. She was the healing truth. She was the living proof that the answer to a lie was not more shouting. It was a better, cleaner, more honest fact. I walked her to the edge of the stage, squeezed her hand, and returned to the spotlight. "Family," I said, my voice quiet, but it filled the sudden hush. We are all told what that word is supposed to mean, but sometimes, family is not the place you are born. Sometimes, family is just your first, hardest lesson in boundaries. I looked out at the sea of faces. I did not come here tonight to settle a score. I came here to close the books. The $5 million lawsuit against me was withdrawn. My countersuit was withdrawn. The debt, however, was still outstanding. Not the financial one, the moral one. I reached into my pocket, but I didn't pull anything out. "This week," I said, "a 90-year-old woman named Evelyn Marwood, who had guarded the truth for over a decade, received a package. It contained a formal, notarized, and court-stamped letter of apology. It was signed by my mother and by my father. It acknowledged their violation of my grandmother's trust. It did not apologize to me. It apologized to her, to the guardian of the promise." I let that sink in. I did not receive a single dollar, but I received what I was owed. The truth. The circle is now closed. The books are balanced. I looked for one last time at the vast, glittering room. "My name is Maren Eldridge. I am the CEO of Vector Loom. I am the founder of the Never Use a Degree Fund, and I am a data point. Thank you." I turned, and I walked off the stage. The applause was not just applause, it was a physical thing. A wave of sound and respect that hit my back as I walked. It was deafening. I pushed through the black curtain into the sudden, muffled silence of the backstage area. The applause was a dull roar, a distant ocean. Rowan was there. He was not clapping. He was not smiling. He was just there, waiting. His eyes were full of a quiet, profound pride that was louder than the entire ballroom. He didn't say, "You were amazing." He didn't say, "You did it." He just opened his arms. I walked into them. I buried my face in the clean, familiar scent of his suit, and I let go of the last, final, 11-year-old breath. "You're okay," he whispered, his hands in my hair. "I'm okay," I whispered back. I pulled back. He looked at me, his gaze intense. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't make a speech. This was not a performance. This was our life. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a single, perfect, square-cut diamond, set not in an elaborate cage of gold or platinum, but suspended, as if floating, between two simple, strong modern bands of white gold. It was a marvel of engineering. It was a promise of structure. He didn't ask. He just took my left hand, and, in the quiet silence of the backstage, with the roar of my new life just on the other side of the curtain, he slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. The heavy steel exit door, the one that led to the service hallway, and then to the outside, was propped open. I could feel the cold, sharp wind of the lake blowing in, even here. I looked at him, my hand in his, the ring a solid, beautiful weight. He smiled. "Ready to go?" I smiled back. It was not a smile of victory. It was not a smile of revenge. It was the smile of a person who had finally, after a lifetime of being defined by others, defined herself. I held his hand tightly. We turned our backs on the applause, on the gala, on the ballroom, on the entire, glittering, terrible past. We walked, together, through the door, and out into the cold, clear, windy Chicago night. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please share your thoughts and feelings with me in the comments below. And let's talk. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.